Good evening. So tonight I wanted to talk about the chupacabras. I gotta say, this is kind of a funny one. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek subject as far as cryptids go. Uh, Behind all the supermarket tabloids and the rumors and misidentifications and the chupacabra being kind of a catch-all phrase for any time an animal is attacked or killed or found in a strange circumstance, especially here in the Southwest. I got to say, being born in the early 80s and being a child of the 90s, I remember the Weekly World News and supermarket tabloids, especially here. It was really a big thing. Oh, the chupacabra, especially here in Southern California. We have such a strong Hispanic background. And a lot of people who have immigrated here from Mexico, and they bring a lot of these stories. And I remember joking with friends growing up, and, oh, it's the chupacabra, careful, it's the chupacabra. And then you'd see the occasional documentary on TV. You'd hear about it. You'd read a quick excerpt, but there was always this kind of the same way Bigfoot is in the mainstream media. Like, it's not like a real thing. It's not like a real phenomenon. It's just a folklore legend. It's something to keep kids at night, or it's just a story, like a campfire story, so to speak, that's kind of gotten blown out of proportion. Or at least that's very much what most people think. So the first thing, when you search chupacabra or you start looking into this thing, you get two very distinct images or imagery of what a chupacabra is. The first one, which is a lot more believable or a lot more logical, is something akin to like a coyote or a wild dog, usually with mange, or maybe interbred with some kind of a dog that is a hairless variety. I know in Mexico they do have hairless dogs, and there's also hairless cats and other breeds. I've even seen hairless guinea pigs before. But mange is a skin condition. It can be spread, and it can cause dogs and other animals that have hair to lose their hair. And there can also be other genetic reasons for them to lose their hair. And coyotes, as much as they look like a dog, they can be very brutal, a lot like wolves. They can even take down deer. They can take down livestock. They're out in the wild and they're scrounging. They have to fight for their dinner. They have to fight for their water. And they can also get other diseases, and they can get rabies and be quite vicious. So if you've heard the folklores of a chupacabra and you came across one of these things or found one, especially all diseased and mangled up, and it was attacking your goats or your sheep or your livestock or your rabbits, whatever, you might think, wow, that's a chupacabra, if you didn't know what else to call it. So that seems to be one side of the story. So the other side of the chupacabra story is something a lot more cryptid and paranormal. Chupacabra meaning goat sucker. I think most people know that by now. But they describe an upright, vaguely ape-humanoid thing with a tail, with fangs and claws, typically described as two fingers, and having like a goat sucker mouth, being almost like kind of like a cross between some kind of alien and demon monkey little creature with like ridges on his back, and supposed to be some kind of little demon that comes and kills livestock, especially goats apparently, and sheep and small cattle. Occasionally you hear stories of them taking cows or horses or bigger animals, but it seems to be more the medium-sized livestock, if you will. And this folklore tradition goes back a long time, and people see these things. They're a lot more upright, walking, and it would be a very, very far stretch of the imagination to think from manged coyote to one of these things. And if you look in North America, and we have traditions of the puckwudgies. I just did a video on little people and puckwudgies, and surprisingly, I know puckwudgies sometimes reported to have like bows and arrows and little spears and stuff like that. But there's other reports of them being very like razor-backed and clawed and evil, and not exactly like a chupacabra, but very similar. And it seems the phenomenon of chupacabra is kind of taken over all around the United States. We also occasionally in the Southwest and different parts see something called a devil monkey, where it looks like an overgrown half dog, half baboon. I've done videos about the devil monkey as well and talked about them. And not exactly like a chupacabra, but getting kind of in that ballpark of something like a puckwudgie or a devil monkey, or maybe like an escaped baboon, but they don't really eat meat though, and I don't really see them sucking on goats. So it seems like you kind of get a mix of things here. And then I think when you do find these pictures of strange emaciated bodies that maybe was a dog or a coyote stuck in a tree, or contorted or torn up or hit by a car and rotted, you can kind of maybe figure out or surmise, or people can think, oh, that was a chupacabra, and they can kind of take it from there. And that's about the only time, like in this picture here, I think you would construe some kind of a dog or coyote or fox or something as like the chupacabra as we think about. But mange coyotes, I've actually seen them before. When you see a coyote in real life with a nice, beautiful coat, and they look like a little mini wolf, it's kind of startling because you're like, it's a dog, but it's not a dog. It's a coyote. They're kind of cool. They're kind of cool to see. But if you've ever seen one with mange, I've seen one with mange in my life, and it is very disheartening because they have dark skin underneath. Even most coyotes have a lighter coat. They just look very, and you can see their teeth and their ears and the veins and ribs. And typically if a coyote has mange, it ain't so healthy typically anyway, and you see ribs and you see the folds of skin, and they're just generally a lot more freaky, or sometimes they still have some hair across the back, which kind of goes to that classic description of a chupacabra. And you kind of see where if someone doesn't know what to call it, they call it that. Kind of like, I don't know, I think Bigfoot's kind of a good analogous to this, where they say, oh, you saw a bear, but you really saw Bigfoot. It's like, no, Bigfoot, if you really look at it, it's quite different than a bear. And I think these coyotes with mange, this picture I found really interesting, is it appears to be a dog or coyote walking on its hind legs. Now, this could be a doctored photo. All these red circle photos you find on the internet, I think, have been doctored or cut up or from a movie or something. I don't think this is from a movie, but if this is a real picture, which I'm not saying it is, I think they captured a dog man in this one more than they captured a coyote, because if you look at the size of the head, the body, and the way it's kind of hunched and walking, I mean, a coyote might be able to take a few steps on its hind legs, but it probably wouldn't look like that. And then there's other people who know a lot more about this have come up. You know, they like, oh, they're kind of a separate thing. They have like little bat ears, and they have ribs showing, and they have spots and flexible hips and a long skinny tail, which, to be honest, sounds more like a Tasmanian tiger than anything else, if I'm quite honest, which is actually a marsupial that ended up looking like a wolf through evolution or some other means. And yeah, so I found it quite fascinating. But then you get into the other side of the chupacabra, which is the upright walking demon monkey kind of thing. And you know, I got to say, you look for Bigfoot images and you've kind of seen it all before. You look up chupacabra images like I did for this video, and wow, there's quite a bit going on out there. I guess it's kind of Mexico's version of like a Bigfoot or something else, you know, kind of their homegrown cryptid hero, if you will. And there's some quite striking imagery out there like that one. And then this one here, which is obviously some kind of a CGI thing. I don't know, someone trying to fake, you know, the whole YouTube red circle thing. But to me, this is an obvious fake, and it came up as chupacabra. And although I think the long tail and the legs are kind of fit that general description like we were saying. Then you get into the more interesting thing of like these dried out corpses. To me, this almost looks like a bull terrier or something with that kind of big rounded nose, or possum or raccoon or something else. It's really hard to tell on some of these scales, but that would definitely be a little freaky. And if you're in the Southwest or something and you came across this animal, you might think, wow, that's a dead chupacabra. I don't know what that is. And one thing I've noticed, animals can really look quite different once they're dead, and especially dried out and everything. And the classic image, like this one's come up. I remember this image on the cover of like Weekly World News growing up. It's obviously somebody's like Ripley's Believe It or Not wax museum kind of sculpture of a chupacabra. But to me, this really is very quite different than what you would expect with a coyote with mange, or even like a devil monkey. This one has almost kind of like a fish-like appearance. And then you hear other things, we got a chupacabra on tape, and people describe them as very tiny, as almost like a foot and a half high, and describe them as more like little goblin or like gnome like creatures. And that seems to be a bit different than the classic goat sucker, fang, spiny ridge type creature. So it just kind of seems to be like a catch-all phrase for unexplained little creatures or things we're seeing. And cattle mutilation is a real thing, and it's a real problem all across the United States. And you get people who come up with images like this. Like, to me, this image here of a chupacabra looks like some kind of CGI, or it's a picture from, like, it almost looks like a video game monster that they superimposed onto a background to try to catch attention. But if you're just doing it as artwork, I think that might be a pretty good representation of what the actual chupacabra, the one from Tales and Legends, might be. And quite fascinating. And then there's this one going around. I remember watching this on Top Videos or Chills, one of those big YouTube channels, and you see this thing lumping through the distance in the middle of the desert, and you're like, I've heard this one was from the Middle East, I heard this one was from Mexico, I've heard it from all over the place. The thing that got me is you don't see any dust as it walks, you don't really see much of a shadow. The whole thing just looks CGI to me, like it was done as an art project or a school project or part of a movie or something. And yeah, so in closing, the chupacabra, I do think there's some kind of real folkloric creature out there that could be akin to, say, like a dog man, or some of the more ferocious varieties of Bigfoot, or devil monkeys, some of the things people are seeing across the U.S. that could be some kind of green reptile, spiky creature that likes to eat livestock. And then I think it's also perpetuated by just poor coyotes and mixed dogs and stuff like that are having a hard time out there. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on the chupacabra. I think there really might be something going on with the little upright walking demon-looking creature, and those poor coyotes out there with mange are kind of helping to spread that. Anyway, if you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I appreciate it, and stay safe out there in the woods and in the deserts. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find me at unstellar.com. You can also find me at twitter.com at realmattsquatch. This is where I post notifications for new videos outside of YouTube. And I'm also on Instagram. I post other random pictures here too, and sometimes some stuff about Bigfoot as well. And you can always email me at mattsquatchpresents@gmail.com.